So when you assemble the Starlit Sky Shrug, you'll always be sewing the sides of the stitches of one piece onto the cast on or cast off edge of another piece. So the stitches are going in different directions. I thought I'd prepare a video to show you how this is done. You'll be working from the right side, and you'll need to make sure regularly that your pieces are keeping the same length from start to end and that they aren't stretched either. Each piece should be 15 centimeters or 6 inches from end to end. And you can have a look and see where the center section starts, and that's a good place to start by holding your pieces together. So we know that this stitch here is roughly where we want this stitch to join to, if we want the whole piece to end up evenly joined. We don't want to have it all stretched out over this side and kind of scrunched together on that side. We need a nice even join. So start by putting the pieces together. You could even pin them if you wanted to, but I'm quite comfortable just holding them together. And so if you hold the pieces in your hand, you'll be able to make a join. I'll come up through the first stitch here, and I'm going to work through 2 loops on the edge there. You can see that there are 2 threads there, 1 and 2. And then I'm going to go back through the center of this stitch here and up through the center of the next stitch. So you can see again I've got 2 threads there, the left side of that stitch and the right side of this stitch. And then I'm going to go in wherever my needle has come up there. I'm going to go in the stitch more or less opposite that on the other side, and I'm going to make sure that my needle passes under 2 loops of thread, and then I'll go back down into the same stitch. You can see I left from here, gone through there, and I'm going to go back into the same stitch. Then I'll come up in the middle of the next stitch, and again you can see the left side of this stitch and the right side of this stitch there, and then again holding my piece nice and evenly so that it's not stretched in either direction. I'll look and see where to work next. I'm going to work into there and out of there, so that again I've got 2 loops of thread. There's 1 white thread and 1 blue thread there under my needle, and then I'll work back into the same stitch that I came out of. So you can see I came out of that stitch there. I'll go back in the same place. And you can see that we're forming almost like a knit stitch into there. So now I've come out of there. Again, I might just regularly want to check that I'm not stretching the piece too much on either side. A lot of knitters will probably find it easier to pin this. And so again, I'm going to come up here and I'll work through 2 loops there. You can see that I've got 2 threads over the needle there. And I'll work back into this stitch and up again out of the next stitch. Now here, if I went into the next stitch, it would probably start to gather this bit in. So I'm actually going to go back into the same stitch I worked through before, and again through 2 loops there, and back into this stitch. And so I'm keeping a nice even tension on both sides. So up in the next stitch, through 2 loops there on that side, down into this stitch. And now that I've made a start and I've got this side joined, it's becoming a lot easier to do. So I can work a little bit more quickly, but the join will look nice and even. And at some point I'm going to want to tighten it slightly. So I can pull on the thread there and it will pull along and tighten the stitches as we go. And that should give us a fairly even join there. When you're picking up stitches to work the ribbing around the cuff or around the body of the Starlit Sky Shrug, sometimes you'll be working into the cast on or cast off edge of a square, and sometimes you'll be working into the side of the stitches. So that will work out slightly differently. Each square has 43 stitches in total along its cast on or cast off edge. And the number of rows it has can vary slightly depending on the maker's tension. However, we'll still want to pick up 43 stitches into the side of the square. So we'll be looking really much more at the number of stitches we're working rather than the number of rows that there are in the square. So we'll sometimes pick up more stitches or fewer stitches into each side stitch as we go along than we would when we're working along here. So let's look at how I've done this in the pattern. Using a new length of yarn and your needles, and you will want a circular needle for this. You're going to put your needle into the center of a stitch and pull up the yarn, and you'll do this all the way around, and then you'll knit into these picked up stitches on the next round, and we'll be doing those as ribbing. So you simply pick one up in the middle of each stitch where you see a V shape. Some of these will be shaped more like an arrow or a capital A. We don't want to pick up in the middle of those, only into the middle of the V shapes. So we do that all along, and we should get 43 stitches, or if our seaming has taken one of the stitches or a side of each of the end stitches, we might get 42, in which case on that occasion only, when we get to the end of the square, we could pick up a stitch, and this is a little bit more tricky, between the legs of those A-shaped stitches, like that. So you can see I've got one there in the V-shaped stitch, as I have done all the way along, and one between two V-shaped stitches in the kind of capital A-shaped legs. So I would only do that if I was at the end of work, picking up the stitches into the cast on or cast off edge of a square, and I realised I've only got 42 stitches. And that might happen if you've seamed some of your stitches together. So then I'll continue working to the end of this square until I've got my 43 stitches. So there we have our 43 stitches already on the needles, and we're going to start working into the side now. What I found is best is to try and work 3 stitches between each of these bands, and that will give me 15. Over here I'll try and work 3 stitches between each of these bands, and that will give me another 15. So that's my 30 stitches. I'll work 1 stitch into each of those, so that gives me 32, and then I'll try and work 11 stitches into the side here. Sometimes you might have to miss a stitch, but as long as they're fairly evenly spread, we've got 15 here, 15 here, and 13 here, you will find that your garment looks even. So I'm going to pick up a stitch in here, here, and here, and then here, here, and here, and it really is just approximately 1, again, it's a little bit more difficult than working into those nice V-shaped stitches, but you will get the hang of it as you go along. And so I've got 3 stitches worked into there. 1, 2, and 3 here. Try not to pull the white thread through too much. And then I'll work 3 here. And then I'm going to make sure that I pick up a stitch into that garter rib there, and 11 stitches along here. Now these stitches are much looser, but there are 12 rows here, so it should be easy enough to pick up 11 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Am I about halfway? Yes, that's good. 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11. And then I'm going to work one into the garter rib here. Again, a little bit trickier there. I'll want to stretch that slightly. And then again, I'll be working 3 into each of those bands between the white rows there. So the stitches, when you've got them picked up like that, they're fairly evenly balanced along the side here and along the edge here. You don't see any distinct gaps. You can put it down every now and again to check if there is a particularly large gap between some of the stitches. And then once you've done that, you'll join with these stitches and start knit purl rib all the way around. And here's the finished effect. That's how the ribbing looks in the side stitches, and that's how it looks in the end stitches where the stitches have been picked up in the same way. And here's how it looks on the gusset section, which is just plain stocking stitch.